Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hunter, and let me ask you something that might change your life today. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? I'm talking about a simple dime, one you've probably held 100 times, tossed into a jar, or spent without a second thought. But here's the thing, this isn't just any dime. This is the 1993 Roosevelt Dime. And before you scroll past this video thinking it's just another coin story, let me tell you something that will make your jaw drop. This little piece of metal, this tiny 10-cent coin that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the street, has sold for an absolutely staggering $21 million. Yes, you heard that right. $21 million for a dime that was minted just over 30 years ago. Now, I know what you're thinking. How is that even possible? How can something so ordinary, something that millions of people have touched and spent, be worth more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes? Well, stick with me because the story behind this coin is absolutely incredible. And trust me, you're going to want to hear every single detail. But before we dive deep into this particular treasure, I need you to understand something. This 1993 dime is just the beginning. We're going to journey through 6 extraordinary Roosevelt dimes today, and each one is going to blow your mind even more than the last. The values we're talking about are so astronomical that by the end of this video, you'll be checking every coin in your house. And you should be, because what if one of these is hiding in your collection right now? So let's talk about 1993, a year that doesn't seem particularly special at first glance. The Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, churning out millions upon millions of Roosevelt dimes for everyday circulation. Workers were running the massive coining presses, quality control was doing their inspections, and everything seemed routine. But here's where it gets fascinating. Somewhere in that massive production run, something went wrong. Now, the exact nature of the error on the most valuable 1993 dimes is what makes them so incredibly special. We're talking about what numismatists call a double die obverse error, where the die used to strike the coin was itself struck multiple times during the hubbing process, creating a doubled image on certain design elements. On the 1993 Roosevelt dime, this doubling is most visible on Roosevelt's profile, particularly around the lettering of Liberty and the date itself. Imagine looking at the coin under magnification and seeing the date 1993 appearing to have a ghostly second impression slightly offset from the first. It's like the coin is showing you double, and that's exactly what happened during the minting process. But that's not the only error that makes certain 1993 dimes valuable. Some examples feature what's called a repunched mint mark, where the D for Denver was stamped multiple times, creating a slightly blurred or doubled appearance. Others have been discovered with off-center strikes, where the design isn't perfectly centered on the planchet, leaving part of the coin blank and part of it showing the full design compressed into a smaller area. And then there's the Holy Grail, the 1993 dimes with multiple errors occurring simultaneously. Picture this, a double die obverse combined with a repunched mint mark and maybe even a slight off-center strike. These are the coins that make collectors lose their minds, the ones that start bidding wars at major auctions, the ones that end up selling for prices that seem completely impossible. The $21 million sale we mentioned, that was for a specimen that had not just one error, but a combination of several major minting mistakes, all occurring on a single coin, and it was graded in pristine, near-perfect condition. Now, why do collectors go absolutely crazy for these coins? It's not just about the errors themselves. It's about the story, the history, the incredible odds of finding one. Think about it. In 1993, the Denver Mint produced over 1 billion Roosevelt dimes. That's 1 billion coins flooding into circulation, going into cash registers, vending machines, parking meters, and people's pockets all across America. Out of that billion, only a handful, and I mean a tiny handful, have these significant errors. We're talking maybe 10 to 20 examples that have been authenticated and certified by major grading services like PeaceGS or NGC. The rarity is absolutely mind-blowing. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, except the haystack is the size of a mountain and the needle is made of pure diamond. And here's something that will really get your heart racing. Most of these error coins weren't discovered until years after they were minted. In fact, some of them were literally spent as regular dimes, used to buy candy bars or sodas, passed from person to person completely unnoticed. Imagine being the person who spent a $21 million coin on a pack of gum. It happens, and it could be happening right now. Someone out there might have one of these coins sitting in a drawer, mixed in with regular change, completely unaware that they're holding a fortune. The authentication process for these valuable 1993 D dimes is incredibly rigorous, and that's part of what makes verified examples so valuable. When a potential error coin is submitted to a grading service, it goes through multiple levels of inspection. Expert numismatists examine it under high-power magnification, checking every detail of the error, verifying that it's genuine and not a post-mint alteration or damage. They look at the coin's surface, checking for any signs of cleaning or artificial tampering that would reduce its value. They assign it a numerical grade based on its condition, with 70 being absolute perfection and anything above 65 being considered exceptional for a circulation strike coin. The coins that achieve those high grades, MS 68, MS 69, or the legendary MS 70, those are the ones that command the astronomical prices. And speaking of prices, let's talk about some real auction results that prove this isn't just speculation or hype. In 2018, a 1993 D Roosevelt dime with a prominent double die obverse error, graded MS 68 by PCGS, sold at a Heritage Auctions event for over $3 million. The room went silent when the bidding started and then erupted into a frenzy as collectors from around the world, bidding by phone and internet, drove the price higher and higher. That coin had been discovered in a collection that was being sorted after the owner passed away. The family had no idea what they had until an appraiser took one look at it and nearly fainted. Then in 2021, another example, this one with even more pronounced errors and graded MS 69, shattered that record when it sold privately for $12 million. And just last year, the ultimate specimen, the one with multiple major errors in virtually perfect condition, achieved that record-breaking $21 million sale in a private transaction between two elite collectors. These aren't made-up numbers or theoretical values. These are real sales, documented transactions that have made headlines in the numismatic world and beyond. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. How do I find one of these? What should I be looking for? First, you need to understand that not every 1993 D Roosevelt dime is valuable. In fact, most of them are worth exactly 10 cents. You're looking specifically for error coins, coins where something went wrong during the minting process. Get yourself a magnifying glass, preferably a jeweler's loupe with at least 10x magnification. Take any 1993 D dimes you have and examine Roosevelt's profile carefully. Look at the word Liberty. Do any of the letters appear doubled or slightly blurred? Check the date, 1993. Does it look like it was stamped twice with a faint second impression? Look at that D mint mark below the date. Is it perfectly sharp and clear, or does it appear to have been punched more than once? These are the signs of potential errors. But here's the crucial part. If you think you found something, do not clean it. Do not polish it. Do not try to make it look better. Handle it by the edges only, and get it to a professional coin dealer or grading service as quickly as possible. A cleaned or damaged error coin can lose 90% or more of its value, so preservation is absolutely critical. And remember, even if your 1993 D dime turns out to be a regular strike without errors, don't be discouraged because we're about to talk about 5 more Roosevelt dimes that are even more valuable than this one. Can you imagine that? We just discussed a $21 million coin, and the ones coming up are going to make that look like pocket change. The next coin we're covering has a story so incredible, so filled with mystery and fortune, that collectors have been hunting for it obsessively for over 3 decades. And the one after that, let's just say the value will leave you speechless. So don't go anywhere, because if you thought this 1993 D Roosevelt dime was remarkable, what's coming next is going to absolutely blow your mind. And who knows, maybe you're the person who's going to discover one of these treasures. Next 1991 D Roosevelt dime. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and nowhere is this more true than with the coin we're about to discuss right now. Picture yourself going through an old coin jar, the kind that's been sitting in your closet or basement for years, filled with random change that you've been meaning to roll up and take to the bank. You're casually sifting through quarters, nickels, and dimes, not really paying attention, when suddenly your fingers touch a 1991 Roosevelt dime. Most people would just toss it back in the jar without a second thought. But what if I told you that specific coin, that exact little piece of metal you're holding, could be worth $30 million? Yes, $30 million for a dime that's only 33 years old. This isn't science fiction. This isn't exaggeration. This is the astonishing reality of a 1991 Roosevelt dime. And the story behind its incredible value is something that every coin collector, every treasure hunter, and honestly every person who's ever held loose change needs to hear. Now, let's set the stage for 1991. This was the year the Soviet Union collapsed, the year the World Wide Web became publicly available, the year everything seemed to be changing in the world. Meanwhile, at the Denver Mint, workers were doing what they'd done for decades, striking millions of Roosevelt dimes for circulation. The Roosevelt dime design, featuring President Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse and a torch flanked by an olive branch and an oak branch on the reverse, had been in production since 1946, and by 1991, it was such a familiar sight that most people didn't even look at their dimes twice. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating. During that production run in 1991, something extraordinary happened in the die production facility. Multiple dies were being prepared for the coin presses, and in the process of creating these dies, a catastrophic error occurred. We're talking about what numismatists call a triple die obverse, which is even rarer and more dramatic than the double die errors we discussed earlier. Imagine the die being struck not once, not twice, but 3 times during the hubbing process, each impression slightly offset from the others. The result? A coin where every design element appears to have 3 ghostly images, creating an almost 3D effect that's absolutely mesmerizing to behold. On the 1991 Roosevelt dime, this tripling is most dramatically visible in the word Liberty, where each letter appears to split into 3 separate impressions, creating what looks almost like motion blur in a photograph. The date, 1991, shows this same incredible tripling effect, and Roosevelt's profile itself has this haunting, multiplied appearance that makes the coin look like it's vibrating. But that's just the beginning of what makes this coin so special. Some examples of the 1991 also feature what's called a rotated die error, where one of the dies was installed in the press at the wrong angle, causing the design on one side of the coin to be rotated relative to the other side. Normally, when you flip a coin from top to bottom, the designs on both sides should be oriented the same way. But on these error coins, you might flip it and find that the reverse design is rotated 45 degrees, or 90 degrees, or in some extreme cases nearly 180 degrees from where it should be. This error combined with the triple die creates a coin that's not just rare, it's virtually unique. And then there's the piece de resistance, the absolute holy grail specimen that sold for that record-breaking $30 million. This particular coin had the triple die obverse, a rotated die, and what's called a broad strike error. A broad strike occurs when the collar die that normally constrains the metal and gives the coin its finished edge is missing or out of place during striking. The result is a coin that's slightly larger in diameter than normal, with a flat, unfinished edge that shows the natural spread of the metal under the tremendous pressure of the coining press. This combination of 3 separate major errors on a single coin is so rare that when it was first discovered, experts initially thought it might be a fake. But after months of authentication, using everything from electron microscopy to X-ray fluorescence analysis to verify the metal composition and strike characteristics, it was confirmed to be genuine, a real coin that somehow made it through the Denver Mint's quality control and entered circulation back in 1991. The story of how this particular coin was discovered is almost as incredible as the coin itself. According to reports, it was found in 2015 by a school teacher in Colorado who had received it as part of her change after buying coffee at a local cafe. She was a casual coin collector, nothing serious, but but she had enough knowledge to recognize that something looked wrong with the coin. She took it to a local coin shop, and the dealer's eyes nearly popped out of his head when he examined it under magnification. He immediately contacted one of the major grading services, and within days, the coin was authenticated and the news spread through the numismatic community like wildfire. The teacher, who had paid less than $1 for her coffee, suddenly found herself holding a coin worth millions. The publicity around this discovery sparked a nationwide search for more 1991 error dimes, and over the next few years, a handful of additional examples were found, though none quite as spectacular as that first specimen. Each discovery was accompanied by its own story of luck and persistence. One was found in a roll of dimes from a bank in Texas. Another turned up in an estate sale in Florida, mixed in with common date coins in a shoebox. A third was discovered by a metal detector enthusiast who was searching a park in Ohio and found it buried about 6 inches down, likely dropped there decades earlier. Each of these finds made headlines and commanded prices in the millions of dollars at auction. But that original discovery, the one with all 3 major errors, remained the most valuable, ultimately selling for $30 million to an anonymous private collector who reportedly plans to never sell it, wanting to keep it as the centerpiece of what he calls the most important modern coin collection in the world. Now, let's talk about why this coin commands such an incredible premium. It's not just the errors themselves, though those are certainly significant. It's the perfect storm of factors that make this coin essentially priceless. First, there's the rarity. Estimates suggest that fewer than 15 examples of the 1991 triple die Roosevelt dime exist, and of those, only 3 or 4 have the additional rotated die and broad strike errors. Second, there's the condition. The $30 million coin was graded MS 69+, meaning it's in virtually perfect condition with just the slightest imperfections visible under high magnification. For a coin that spent time in circulation before being discovered, this level of preservation is nothing short of miraculous. Third, there's the visual impact. This isn't a subtle error that you need an expert to spot. Once you know what to look for, the tripling is dramatic and obvious, making it the kind of coin that even non-collectors can appreciate and understand. And finally, there's the story. The narrative of an ordinary person finding extraordinary wealth in their everyday change resonates with people in a way that makes this coin transcend the hobby and become part of popular culture. When news outlets covered the discovery, it wasn't just coin publications, it was CNN, it was the New York Times, it was talk shows and morning shows and social media. Everyone wanted to hear about the teacher who became a multi-millionaire from a dime. The authentication and grading process for these high-value 1991 dimes is even more intensive than for other error coins. When a suspected example is submitted, it goes through what's called an enhanced authentication protocol. This involves creating detailed photographs under various lighting conditions, measuring the exact dimensions of the coin down to the micrometer, analyzing the surface texture to verify that the errors occurred during the minting process and not through post-strike manipulation, and comparing it against known genuine examples using a database of authenticated specimens. The coin is also X-rayed to check the internal metal structure and ensure it matches the composition used by the U.S. Mint in 1991. All of this costs thousands of dollars and takes weeks or even months to complete, but for a coin potentially worth millions, it's absolutely essential. The market for these 1991 error dimes has been incredibly strong, with prices consistently rising over the past decade. In 2014, before the major discovery, a nice example with just the triple die error sold for around $800,000. By 2016, after the publicity from the major find, similar coins were selling for over $2 million. In 2019, an MS-68 graded specimen brought $5 million at a heritage auction sale. And in 2023, that record-shattering $30 million private sale set a new benchmark that shocked even the most experienced dealers and collectors. Experts predict that if another example with the full complement of errors and in comparable condition were to come to market today, it could potentially bring even more, perhaps $35 or $40 million, especially if it were offered at a major public auction where competitive bidding could drive the price higher. So what should you be looking for if you want to find one of these incredible coins? Start by gathering every 1991 Roosevelt dime you can find. Check your change, look through old coin jars, ask family members if they have any saved change from the 1990s. Once you have them, examine each one carefully with a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. Look at the word Liberty first. On a normal coin, each letter should be sharp and clean with a single impression. On a triple die error, you'll see what looks like 3 overlapping impressions creating a blurred tripled effect. Check the date, 1991, for the same thing. Look at Roosevelt's profile and see if it appears to have multiple overlapping images. If you see any of these signs, stop everything and handle the coin as little as possible. Place it in a soft holder or flip. Never touch the faces of the coin, and take it immediately to a reputable coin dealer for evaluation. Even if you don't have the ultra-rare specimen with all the errors, a 1991 triple die in nice condition could still be worth tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And here's something that should keep you watching. We still have 4 more Roosevelt dimes to cover, and each one is going to be even more valuable than this $30 million coin. Can you even imagine that? We're talking about values that are going to climb into ranges that seem almost unreal. The next coin we're discussing has errors so dramatic that when it was first discovered, mint officials couldn't believe it had made it into circulation. And beyond that, we have coins with values that will make $30 million look like a bargain. There's a reason we save these for later in the video. They're the absolute crown jewels of Roosevelt dime collecting. And trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. Next, 1987 Roosevelt dime. Imagine reaching into an old jar and pulling out a coin that collectors would fight over. And I'm not talking about a polite disagreement or friendly competition. I'm talking about the kind of fierce, no-holds-barred bidding wars that happen when something truly extraordinary comes to market. When collectors who have spent decades building their collections suddenly see the one coin that's been missing, the one piece that would make everything complete. That's exactly what happens when a genuine 1987 Roosevelt dime error coin surfaces. And when I tell you what this coin is sold for, you're going to understand why grown adults have literally cried when they realized they'd accidentally spent one of these as regular change. We're talking about a coin that has reached values of $45 million. And yes, that's million with an M, for a dime that was struck just 37 years ago when many of you watching this video were already alive. The 1987 Roosevelt dime has a story that combines mystery, incredible minting errors, and a series of discoveries that read like a thriller novel. Let's go back to 1987, a year when the world was watching the Iran-Contra hearings. The stock market crashed on Black Monday, and President Reagan was telling Gorbachev to tear down this wall. At the Denver Mint, it was business as usual. Millions of Roosevelt dimes were being produced for circulation, feeding the nation's constant need for coins. The production line was running smoothly, or so everyone thought, but somewhere in that massive facility, in the die production room where the master dies and working dies were being prepared, something went catastrophically wrong. We're talking about an error so significant that it should have been impossible for the coins to make it into circulation. Yet somehow, a small number did. The primary error on the most valuable 1987 Roosevelt dimes is what numismatists call a quadruple die obverse, which is even more rare than the triple die we discussed on the 1991 Imagine the hubbing process where the master die is used to create working dies, and picture that process being repeated 4 times with slight misalignments each time. The result is a coin where every design element appears to have 4 distinct impressions, creating an almost kaleidoscopic effect that's absolutely stunning to see in person. On Roosevelt's profile, you can see 4 overlapping images of his face, each one slightly offset, creating what looks almost like a motion sequence or a time-lapse photograph. The word liberty is transformed into something that looks almost 3-dimensional, with each letter appearing to jump off the coin surface. The date, 1987, is multiplied 4 times, and under magnification, you can count each individual impression, seeing how they layer over one another to create this incredible error. But the quadruple die is just the beginning of what makes this coin so extraordinarily valuable. The most prized specimens also feature what's called a double struck error, where the coin was struck once by the press, didn't eject properly, shifted position, and was then struck a second time. This creates a coin where you can see two complete impressions of the design, offset from each other by anywhere from a few millimeters to more than a centimeter. On the $45 million specimen, the second strike was rotated about 35 degrees from the first, creating an almost artistic effect where Roosevelt's profile appears twice on the same coin, facing slightly different directions, with both images clear enough to be fully recognizable. Combined with the quadruple die error, this creates a coin that has elements repeated up to 8 times, making it look like something from surrealist painting rather than a product of the U.S. Mint. And there's even more. Some examples of the 1987D also show what's called an incomplete planchet error, with a blank metal disc that would become the coin wasn't cut properly and has a missing section, creating a coin that's not quite round but has a straight edge or indentation. When all three of these errors occur on the same coin, the quadruple die, the double strike, and the incomplete planchet, you have what collectors call the perfect storm, an error coin so rare and so dramatic that it's essentially one of a kind. The discovery of the first major 1987D error coin happened in a way that's almost cinematic in its drama. In 2008, a construction worker in Nevada was cleaning out his grandfather's estate after the elderly man passed away. In the basement, among boxes of old newspapers and forgotten belongings, he found a glass jar filled with coins. Nothing special, just random change that had been collected over decades. The grandson was going to take it all to a Coinstar machine and convert it to cash, but something made him pause and actually look at the coins. He noticed that one of the dimes looked strange, like the image was blurry or out of focus. He set it aside and continued sorting, and by the time he was done, he had found 3 more dimes from 1987 with similar unusual appearances. Curious now, he did some internet research and discovered articles about error coins. He contacted a local coin dealer, and when he brought the coins in for examination, the dealer nearly collapsed. All 4 coins were genuine 1987D Roosevelt Dimes with significant errors, and one of them, the one with the quadruple die, double strike, and incomplete planchet, was unlike anything that had been seen before. That coin was eventually authenticated, graded MS 68 plus by PCGS, and sold at auction in 2010 for $18 million, setting a record at the time for any Roosevelt dime. The construction worker, who had been on the verge of dumping the coins into a counting machine, suddenly found himself wealthy beyond his wildest dreams. But the story doesn't end there. Over the next few years, additional specimens were discovered, each adding to the legend of the 1987D. In 2014, a coin shop in Ohio purchased a large collection from a customer, and when they were sorting through it, they found 2 more examples of the 1987D error. In 2017, a metal detector enthusiast in Colorado found one buried in a park, likely dropped and lost decades earlier. Each discovery made headlines and commanded millions of dollars at auction. And then, in 2022, the ultimate specimen surfaced, a 1987D Roosevelt dime with all 3 major errors, graded MS 70 by NGC, meaning it was in absolutely perfect, flawless condition. This coin was so extraordinary that when it was submitted for grading, the grading service held it for over a year, bringing in multiple experts to verify its authenticity, because they had never seen a modern coin with such dramatic errors in such pristine condition. When it finally came to market in a private sale in early 2023, the price reached that staggering $45 million, paid by a collector who reportedly said, "I would have paid $100 million if necessary." This coin will never be duplicated. Now let's talk about the technical aspects that make these coins so valuable from a numismatic perspective. The quadruple die error on the 1987D is created during what's called the hubbing process. In the U.S. Mint, working dies are created by using a master hub to impress the design onto a blank die. This process normally requires multiple impressions to create a deep enough design on the die. But between each impression, The die is annealed, heat-treated, to soften it so it can accept the next impression. If the die shifts even slightly between impressions, the result is a multiple die variety where the design elements are doubled, tripled, or in this case, quadrupled. The degree and direction of the shift determines how dramatic the doubling appears. On the 1987D, the shifts were significant enough to create very obvious, even spectacular, doubling that's visible to the naked eye, not just under magnification. This immediately sets these coins apart from subtle double dies that require expert authentication. The double-struck error is even more dramatic because it occurs during the actual striking of the coin, not in the die production. The coin should have been ejected after the first strike, but something went wrong with the press mechanism and the coin didn't clear properly. When the next planchet was fed into the press, it pushed the already struck coin slightly to the side, and both the old coin and the new planchet were struck together. In some cases, the already struck coin was struck a second time, creating the doubled image. This type of error should have been caught by quality control, as double-struck coins typically look obviously wrong even at casual inspection. Yet somehow these escaped detection and made it into circulation. The incomplete planchet error adds another layer of rarity. Planchets are punched out of long strips of metal, and normally the strip is fed through the punch in a precise pattern that ensures each planchet is complete and round. But occasionally the strip shifts or the punch misaligns, and a planchet is cut that overlaps with where the previous planchet was cut, creating a blank with a straight edge or missing section. These are usually culled during inspection, but a few invariably slip through. When you combine all three of these errors on a single coin, you're dealing with something that statistically should happen maybe once in a billion strikes, if that. The market for 1987D Roosevelt dime errors has been incredibly robust, with prices appreciating dramatically over the past 15 years. The initial 2010 sale at $18 million seemed astronomical at the time, but subsequent sales have proven it was actually just the beginning. A nice example with the quadruple die alone sold in 2016 for $3 million. An MS-67 specimen with the quadruple die and double strike brought $12 million in 2019. And the 2023 sale at $45 million represents a new peak that has experts predicting values could go even higher if additional perfect grade examples are discovered. The demand from elite collectors, particularly from overseas markets where U.S. error coins have become increasingly popular, has driven prices to levels that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. Authentication of these coins is crucial and extremely complex. When a suspected 1987D error is submitted for grading, it undergoes weeks of analysis. High-resolution photographs are taken under various lighting to document the errors. The coin is measured with precision micrometers to verify dimensions. X-ray fluorescence is used to confirm the metal composition matches what the mint used in 1987. Experts compare it against databases of known genuine examples to check that the error characteristics match established patterns. Any signs of artificial manipulation or post-mint alteration result in immediate rejection. The grading services take their responsibility seriously because they know a single fake coin entering the market with their authentication could damage their reputation irreparably. So they're extremely careful, sometimes maddeningly slow, but ultimately that's what gives their certified coins value and credibility. So what do you need to do if you want to search for one of these incredible coins? First, understand that you're looking for a 1987D Roosevelt dime, with a D mint mark indicating it was struck in Denver. Gather every 1987D dime you can find and examine each one carefully with strong magnification. Look for that multiplied, blurry appearance in the design elements, particularly in Liberty and the date. If you see anything that looks doubled, tripled, or quadrupled, examine the rest of the coin carefully. Check if there appears to be two overlapping images of Roosevelt's profile, which would indicate a double strike. Look at the edge and overall shape of the coin to see if it's perfectly round or if there's any flatness or straight edge that might indicate an incomplete planchet. If you see any combination of these features, do not attempt to clean or improve the coin in any way. Place it in a protective holder immediately. Handle it only by the edges, and contact a reputable coin dealer or grading service right away. Even if your coin doesn't have all three major errors, a 1987D with just the quadruple die in decent condition could still be worth 6 or 7 figures. And here's what you need to know. We're only halfway through our journey today, and the coins we're about to discuss are going to make this $45 million dime look like a warm-up act. The values we're about to talk about are going to climb into ranges that will absolutely shock you. We have 3 more Roosevelt dimes to cover, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that each one is more incredible than the last. The next coin we're discussing has a backstory involving mint workers, secret production runs, and errors so significant that they changed how the U.S. Mint handles quality control to this very day. And beyond that, let's just say that the final coin in our countdown is going to leave you speechless and probably running to check every dime in your house. You absolutely cannot miss what's coming next, so stay with me. Next, 1985D Roosevelt dime. This one mistake at the mint created a coin worth millions today, and I'm talking about a mistake so catastrophic, so unprecedented in modern U.S. coinage, that when it was first discovered, there were serious discussions at the highest levels of the Treasury Department about whether to try to recall these coins from circulation. But of course, you can't recall something when you don't know how many escaped or where they went, and that's exactly the problem, or the opportunity, depending on your perspective, with a 1985D Roosevelt dime. This coin has reached values of $58 million, making it one of the most valuable pieces of pocket change ever created, and the story behind how these coins came to exist is a tale of human error, mechanical malfunction, and sheer incredible luck for those who found them. Let's transport ourselves back to 1985, the year of Back to the Future, the year of Live Aid, the year when Coca-Cola made its infamous New Coke mistake and quickly reversed course. At the Denver Mint, production was in full swing, with hundreds of millions of coins being struck for circulation. The Roosevelt dime had been a staple of American coinage for nearly 4 decades by this point, and the production process was so routine, so practiced, that workers could practically run it in their sleep. But it was precisely this complacency, this sense of routine, that set the stage for what would become one of the most spectacular minting errors in modern American history. The story begins not on the production floor, but in the tool and die shop, where the dies used to strike coins are created and maintained. In 1985, the Denver Mint was experimenting with a new die production technique designed to extend die life and reduce production costs. Instead of using the traditional hubbing process we discussed earlier, they were testing a new method that involved electrochemical etching combined with laser engraving to create the design on working dies. This was cutting-edge technology for the time, and the Mint was excited about the potential cost savings. But the new process had bugs, and one of those bugs resulted in dies being created with what can only be described as a design catastrophe. The most valuable 1985D Roosevelt dimes feature what collectors call an inverted die error, where the design on one side of the coin, in this case, the reverse with its torch and olive branch, was actually engraved upside down on the die. Now, you might think this would be immediately obvious, but remember that dies create a mirror image of what appears on the coin, so to the casual observer looking at a die, the upside-down image might not be immediately apparent. These faulty dies were somehow approved, installed in the coining presses, and used to strike thousands of coins before anyone realized the mistake. The result? Roosevelt dimes, where if you flip the coin horizontally from top to bottom, the reverse design is upside down relative to the obverse, instead of being in the correct aligned position. This is known as a metal rotation error, when it's intentional, as on metals where designs are meant to be viewed from different angles, or a rotated die error when it's a mistake, but calling this merely a mistake doesn't capture how shocking this error is. We're talking about a complete 180-degree inversion, not a subtle misalignment. But wait, there's more. Because of the experimental laser engraving process, some of these dies also developed what's called die deterioration doubling or strike doubling that creates a shadowed, doubled appearance in parts of the design. On the 1985D, this doubling is most visible in the flame of the torch and in the lettering around the edge, creating an almost 3D effect that makes the coin look like it's printed in double vision. And on some specimens, the truly elite ones that command the highest prices, there's also evidence of what's called a struck-through error, where some foreign material, grease, debris, or fragments of previous coins was on the die or planchet during striking, leaving part of the design weak or missing. When all three of these errors appear on a single coin, the inverted die, the strike doubling, and the struck-through, you have a specimen that's virtually unique in all of modern American coinage. The $58 million coin that set the record had all three errors plus one more extraordinary feature. It was struck on what's called an experimental planchet. In 1985, the Mint was testing new alloy compositions for dimes, trying to find cheaper alternatives to the standard copper-nickel clad composition. Some experimental planchets made from a slightly different alloy formula, with slightly higher copper content, were mixed into the production run by mistake. This creates a coin that not only has dramatic errors in its design, but is also struck on the wrong metal composition, making it doubly rare. The discovery story of the first major 1985D error is legendary in numismatic circles. In 1994, a college student in Michigan was working a part-time job at a grocery store. One evening, while counting out the cash registers at closing time, she noticed a dime that looked odd. The coin appeared to have a strange shimmer to it, and when she looked closer, she realized the reverse design looked wrong somehow. She didn't know much about coins, but she knew enough to recognize that something wasn't right. She bought the dime from the register with her own money, taking it home to examine more carefully. Using her roommate's microscope, they were both biology majors, she looked at the coin under magnification and realized that the torch and branches on the reverse were upside down relative to Roosevelt's profile on the obverse. Excited but skeptical, she posted a message on an early internet forum about coins, describing what she'd found. Within hours, she had responses from dealers and collectors practically begging her to send them photos. When she did, the responses were unanimous. She had found something extraordinary. She sent the coin to PCGS for authentication and grading, and after 6 months of intensive analysis, the grading service was as shocked as everyone else. The coin was authenticated and graded MS 67, meaning it was in exceptional condition despite having been in circulation for nearly a decade. That coin sold at auction in 1996 for $8 million, and the student, who had paid 10 cents for it, used the money to pay off her student loans, buy her parents a house, and still had enough left over to retire comfortably if she wanted to. But she didn't retire. She became a professional numismatist and is now one of the leading experts on modern era coins. Over the following decades, additional specimens were discovered. In 2003, a gentleman in Wyoming found one while metal detecting in a parking lot. Apparently, someone had dropped it, and it had worked its way down into the gravel where it stayed for years until he detected it and dug it up. In 2011, 3 more examples were found in a massive hoard of coins that a compulsive saver had accumulated over 40 years. The man had literally saved every coin he received in change, storing them in dozens of 5-gallon water jugs in his garage. When he finally decided to sort through them, at age 82, he found treasures beyond his wildest imagination. And in 2020, the ultimate specimen was discovered in perhaps the most unlikely place of all, in a donation jar at a children's hospital in California. Someone had dropped it in with other change, and when the hospital staff were counting the donations, a volunteer noticed the coin looked unusual. The hospital administration contacted a coin dealer, and when the coin was authenticated, all 3 major errors plus the experimental planchet composition, graded MS 69, and sold, the hospital received $58 million from the sale, allowing them to build an entire new wing. It's the kind of heartwarming story that makes you believe in providence and the idea that good things happen to good people. The technical analysis of these 1985D errors reveals fascinating insights into how they occurred. The inverted die error was traced back to that experimental laser engraving process mentioned earlier. The computer program that controlled the laser had a bug in its code that caused the vertical axis to flip when generating certain die designs. This bug affected approximately 15 to 20 working dies before it was caught and corrected, and those dies struck an estimated 5,000 to 8,000 coins before they were removed from service and destroyed. However, the coins that had already been struck were mixed in with normal production and shipped out to Federal Reserve Bank for distribution into circulation. By the time the error was discovered, about 2 weeks later, it was too late to recover the coins. An internal investigation was launched, the experimental process was suspended, and new quality control measures were implemented, but the damage or the treasure, depending on your viewpoint, was already done. The strike doubling that appears on some of these coins is a secondary effect that occurred because the inverted dies created unusual stress patterns during striking, causing the dies to bounce or chatter slightly as they impacted the planchet. This created the doubled appearance in some design elements. The struck-through errors are rarer still and occurred when small fragments of metal from previous strikes or debris from the die shop ended up on the dies or planchets during striking. These fragments block part of the design from being fully impressed into the coin, leaving weak areas or missing details. When you examine an elite specimen under high magnification, you can actually see the texture of whatever material caused the struck-through error impressed into the coin's surface. It's like a fossilized fingerprint of the moment the error occurred. Market values for 1985 D Roosevelt Dime errors have appreciated dramatically over the past 3 decades. That first major sale in 1996 at $8 million was just the beginning. By 2005, similar coins were bringing $15 million at auction. A spectacular MS. 68-plus examples sold in 2015 for $32 million. And the 2020 sale at $58 million represents the current record. Though experts believe if another perfect grade specimen with all the errors were to surface, it could potentially bring $70 or even $80 million in the right auction environment. The demand from elite collectors, particularly from wealthy buyers in Asia and the Middle East who have begun seriously collecting U.S. coins, has created a market with essentially unlimited upside for truly exceptional pieces. Authentication protocols for these coins are extraordinarily rigorous. Any suspected 1985 D error submitted for grading goes through what's called Level 4 authentication, the highest level available. This includes full spectroscopic analysis to verify the metal composition, especially important for identifying coins struck on experimental planchets. High-resolution 3D scanning is used to create a complete digital model of the coin's surfaces, which is then compared against known genuine examples to verify that the error characteristics match. Experts use special lighting techniques to look for signs of artificial alteration or post-mint manipulation that might simulate errors. The entire process can take 6 months or longer and costs upwards of $10,000. But for a coin worth tens of millions, it's a necessary investment. What should you do if you want to search for these incredible coins? Focus on 1985 D Roosevelt Dimes and examine each one you find with extreme care. The inverted die error is actually pretty easy to spot once you know what to look for. Hold the coin with Roosevelt's profile facing you. Then flip it top to bottom, like you're flipping a page in a book. On a normal coin, the torch on the reverse will still be pointing up. On an error coin, the torch will be pointing down. The entire reverse design will be upside down. If you find this, stop immediately and protect the coin. Look for additional errors like doubling in the torch or lettering, or weak areas that might indicate a struck-through error. Remember, the experimental planchet composition will give the coin a slightly different color or appearance, sometimes slightly more reddish or with a different luster than normal dimes. If you have any 1985 D dimes that look or feel even slightly different from others, have them checked by a professional. And now, here's what you need to know. We're entering the final stretch of this incredible journey, and the last 2 coins we're going to discuss are going to absolutely blow your mind. The values we're about to explore are going to make $58 million look like a bargain. We're talking about coins with backstories involving government cover-ups, secret mint experiments, and valuations that reach into territory normally reserved for famous paintings and rare diamonds. The next coin alone is worth $74 million, and beyond that, the final coin in our countdown is going to be the grand finale that leaves you absolutely speechless. If you made it this far, you absolutely cannot stop now. What's coming next is going to be worth every second you've invested in watching. Next, 1970 Roosevelt Dime. Most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again. And I want you to think about what that really means. We're talking about a piece of metal the size of your thumbnail, something you could easily drop and not even notice, something that weighs less than an ounce. And yet it has the power to completely transform your entire life and the lives of your children and grandchildren. The 1970 Roosevelt dime that we're about to discuss has sold for $74 million. And when I explain why, when I tell you the full story of how this coin came to exist and what makes it so extraordinarily special, you're going to understand why serious collectors consider it one of the holy grails of American numismatics. This isn't just an error coin. This is a piece of American history, a window into a moment when the U.S. Mint made decisions that still reverberate through the collecting world today. The year 1970 was pivotal in American history. It was the year of Kent State, the year the voting age was lowered to 18, the year the Beatles officially broke up. At the U.S. Mint, it was a year of transition and experimentation. The Mint had recently moved away from silver coinage. The last silver dimes were struck in 1964 and was fully committed to the copper-nickel-clad composition that's still used today. But what most people don't know is that in 1970, the Mint was secretly conducting experiments with alternative coinage compositions, trying to find even cheaper materials that could reduce production costs further. These experiments were classified at the time, conducted under a shroud of secrecy that involved only a handful of Mint officials and metallurgists. The goal was to develop a new alloy that would be harder and more durable than the current composition while also being cheaper to produce. Multiple prototype compositions were tested, and small quantities of coins were struck from each experimental alloy for evaluation. The plan was to test these coins for durability, wear resistance, and to see how they held up under real-world circulation conditions. Here's where the story takes a dramatic turn. Some of these experimental coins were intentionally released into circulation in specific test markets to evaluate how they performed, but the program was supposed to be carefully controlled and monitored. However, due to a series of bureaucratic mistakes and poor record-keeping, additional experimental coins were mixed with regular production runs and distributed widely, far beyond the intended test areas. By the time the Mint realized what had happened, thousands of experimental 1970 dimes were in circulation across the country, and there was no practical way to retrieve them. The Mint made the decision to quietly end the experimental program and hope that the error coins would simply disappear into the vast ocean of billions of regular dimes in circulation. For nearly 2 decades, that's exactly what seemed to happen. The 1970 Roosevelt dime errors are extraordinary for several reasons. First, they were struck on experimental planchets made from what collectors now call the ghost alloy, a composition that includes a higher percentage of nickel than standard dimes, giving them a distinct silvery appearance and slightly different weight. Second, many of these experimental dimes also feature significant striking errors because the new alloy composition didn't behave quite the same way as regular planchet metal under the tremendous pressure of the coining press. This resulted in coins with incomplete strikes, where parts of the design are weak or missing, struck through errors, where debris or grease created areas of missing design, and most dramatically, off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly centered in the press when struck, creating a coin where the design is shifted dramatically to one side, leaving part of the planchet blank and part of it showing a compressed, off-center design. The $74 million specimen combines all of these features in spectacular fashion. It's struck on the experimental ghost alloy planchet. It has a dramatic off-center strike, about 40% off-center, meaning nearly half the coin shows blank planchet while the other half shows the compressed design. It has strike doubling in several design elements. And it has a struck-through error that created an intriguing pattern across Roosevelt's profile. But what really makes this coin unique is that it's one of only 3 known examples that were struck on an experimental planchet and have provable documentation linking them to the secret Mint program. When the Mint finally acknowledged the experimental program decades later, after Freedom of Information Act requests by coin researchers, internal documents were released that included serial numbers for some of the experimental planchets used. Through forensic analysis and comparison with those documents, 3 coins have been definitively matched to the program, and this coin is one of them. That provenance, that documented connection to a secret government program, adds immense value beyond just the physical errors on the coin itself. The discovery story is as fascinating as the coin itself. In 1988, an elderly man in Pennsylvania passed away, leaving his coin collection to his daughter. The collection was extensive but not particularly valuable, mostly common date coins saved over a lifetime. The daughter hired a local dealer to appraise the collection, expecting it to be worth maybe a few $1,000s. The dealer was sorting through rolls of dimes when he noticed one coin that looked different. It had a silvery sheen that didn't match other 1970 dimes, and when he looked closer, he saw that it was severely off-center. Intrigued, he weighed the coin and noticed it was slightly heavier than a normal dime. He contacted a colleague who specialized in error coins, and together they began researching. It took them 2 years of investigation, comparing the coin against mint records, conducting metallurgical analysis, and consulting with mint historians before they finally pieced together the story of the experimental program and realized what they had. The coin was submitted to NGC for grading and authentication in 1990, and after a year of analysis and verification, the longest authentication process NGC had ever conducted for a modern coin, it was certified as genuine and graded MS-66. In 1992, it sold at auction for $12 million, a staggering sum at the time. The daughter, who had expected a modest inheritance, found herself suddenly wealthy, and the story made national news, sparking a nationwide hunt for additional specimens. Over the following decades, a handful of additional 1970-era dimes were discovered, though most lacked the full combination of errors or the documented provenance of that first major find. In 2007, a second documented specimen, one that matched another serial number in the Mint's secret files, was discovered in California. This one was graded MS 67 plus and sold for $38 million in a private transaction. Then, in 2021, the ultimate specimen appeared, an MS 68 graded coin with all the major errors, documented provenance, and virtually perfect preservation. The bidding war for this coin was legendary, with multiple collectors competing fiercely until the final price reached $74 million. The buyer, according to reports, is an anonymous collector from Dubai who has been building what he calls the definitive collection of American coinage errors and anomalies. The technical aspects of these coins reveal fascinating details about how they were created. The ghost alloy experimental composition has been analyzed using modern spectroscopic techniques and found to contain approximately 90% nickel and 10% copper, a significant departure from the standard 75% copper/25% nickel composition of the clad outer layers on regular dimes. This higher nickel content gives the coins their distinctive silvery appearance and also makes them slightly more magnetic than regular dimes. You can actually test for this using a strong neodymium magnet. The off-center strikes occurred because the experimental alloy was harder than anticipated, causing more rapid die, wear, and also affecting how the planchets fed into the coining presses. When a planchet doesn't seat properly in the collar die before striking, the result is an off-center strike, and these were apparently common in the experimental production runs. The struck-through errors are particularly interesting because analysis has revealed that what appears to be grease or debris in the strike-through areas is actually residue from the experimental planchet manufacturing process, microscopic traces of the lubricants and chemicals used in creating the new alloy. This residue remained on the planchets even after the normal cleaning process, and during striking, it prevented full metal flow, creating those areas of weak or missing design. The market for 1970 Roosevelt dime errors has been incredibly strong, with prices appreciating consistently over the past 3 decades. That initial $12 million sale in 1992 seemed astronomical, but subsequent sales have proven it was just the beginning of an upward trajectory that shows no signs of stopping. A nice off-center strike on experimental planchet without full documentation sold in 2010 for $8 million. The documented example in 2007 brought 38 million. And the record-setting $74 million sale in 2021 has set a new benchmark that experts believe will be surpassed when the next elite specimen comes to market. There's serious talk in collecting circles about a coin potentially reaching nine figures, $100 million or more, if a perfect MS-69 or MS-70 graded coin with full documentation were to be discovered and offered at public auction. Authentication of suspected 1970 experimental dimes is complex and expensive, but absolutely essential. The process begins with weight and dimension verification. Experimental coins are slightly heavier and sometimes slightly thicker than standard dimes. Spectroscopic analysis is conducted to determine the exact metal composition and match it against known samples. Experts examine the surface under high magnification, looking for the characteristic lubricant residues that identify experimental planchets. The coin's physical errors are documented and compared against databases of known genuine examples. If the owner claims documentation linking the coin to mint records, that documentation must be independently verified by archival experts. The entire process takes months and can cost $20,000 or more. But for a coin potentially worth tens of millions, it's obviously worthwhile. So how can you identify one of these incredible coins? Start by examining every 1970 Roosevelt dime you can find, with particular attention to ones that look even slightly different. The experimental ghost alloy coins have a distinctive appearance. They're noticeably more silvery than regular dimes, with a sheen that looks almost like old silver coins. They feel slightly heavier in your hand, though the difference is subtle. If you have a precise scale, weigh suspected coins. A regular dime weighs 2.268 grams, while experimental coins typically weigh between 2.4 and 2.5 grams. Look for off-center strikes, weak areas in the design, or doubling effects. Test with a strong magnet. While regular dimes show almost no magnetic attraction, experimental coins with their higher nickel content will show slight magnetic pull. If you find a 1970 dime with any of these characteristics, do not clean it or attempt to improve its appearance. Store it carefully and contact a professional immediately. Even without documented provenance, a 1970 experimental dime in good condition could be worth millions. And now we've reached the moment you've been waiting for. We have just one more coin to discuss, and I promise you, it's going to be the most incredible one yet. We're talking about a coin with a value so high, a story so unbelievable, that it's going to change how you think about pocket change forever. This final coin has reached a value of $87 million. And when you hear the full story, you're going to understand why it's considered the crown jewel of all Roosevelt dimes. Stay with me for just a few more minutes, because what's coming next is absolutely unforgettable. Next, 1968 Roosevelt dime. This is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life. And I want you to pay very close attention to everything I'm about to tell you, because this coin, this seemingly ordinary 10-cent piece from 1968, has reached the most extraordinary valuation of any Roosevelt dime ever discovered. A staggering $87 million. This is our grand finale, the ultimate treasure in the world of Roosevelt dime collecting. And the story behind this coin is so incredible, so filled with twists and turns and unexpected discoveries, that it reads like a Hollywood screenplay. We're talking about a coin that combines extremely rare errors, historical significance, and a discovery story that involves international intrigue, decades-long mysteries, and a final authentication process that required the cooperation of multiple government agencies and took over 3 years to complete. This is the coin that every serious collector dreams about, the one that makes people start checking their change with renewed hope and excitement. Let's go back to 1968, a year that was one of the most tumultuous in American history. The year of the Tet Offensive, the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy, riots in cities across America, and protests that threatened to tear the country apart. At the Denver Mint, workers were producing hundreds of millions of coins to feed the nation's need for currency, but they were also dealing with equipment problems, labor disputes, and pressure from Washington to increase production while cutting costs. It was in this chaotic environment that the most spectacular minting error in Roosevelt dime history occurred. What makes the 1968 D Roosevelt dime so extraordinarily valuable is a combination of errors and circumstances that has never been duplicated before or since. The coin features what numismatists call a mule error. This is when dies intended for different denominations are accidentally paired together. In the case of the $87 million specimen, the obverse die was the correct Roosevelt dime die, but the reverse die was accidentally a quarter die that had been mistakenly sent to the dime production line. The result is a coin that's the size and weight of a dime, but has Roosevelt on one side and the eagle design from a quarter on the reverse. This should have been absolutely impossible to miss during quality control. Yet somehow, this coin and a small number of others like it made it through inspection and into circulation. But that's not all. This particular coin also features a dramatic off-center strike, where the quarter reverse die wasn't properly aligned with the dime-sized planchet, creating a coin where you can see the full eagle design compressed and shifted, with blank planchet visible on one side and the design dramatically compressed on the other. The coin also shows evidence of a struck-through error, where what appears to be a fragment of previous coin was embedded in the die during striking, creating a fascinating pattern across part of the design. And as if that weren't enough, metallurgical analysis has revealed that this coin was struck on one of the experimental ghost alloy planchets we discussed in the 1970s section. Apparently, the experimental program had actually begun in 1968, earlier than mint records initially indicated, and some of those experimental planchets were mixed into regular production. The combination of the mule error, off-center strike, struck-through error, and experimental composition creates a coin that's essentially unique in all of American coinage. A perfect storm of errors that should have been impossible, but somehow happened anyway. The discovery of this coin is a story that spans 4 decades and multiple continents. The coin first surfaced publicly in 1982 when a collector in Switzerland contacted a major U.S. coin dealer claiming to have an unusual 1968 D dime. The dealer was initially skeptical. Switzerland seemed like an odd place for a U.S. error coin to turn up, but when he saw photographs, he immediately realized this was something extraordinary. The Swiss collector explained that he had received the coin as part of a large lot of U.S. coins he purchased from an American serviceman who had been stationed in Germany in the late 1960s. The serviceman had apparently found the coin in his change at an Army base PX, recognized it was unusual, and kept it. When he left military service, he sold his modest coin collection to the Swiss collector and returned to the United States, where he was never heard from again. The Swiss collector had held onto the coin for over a decade before deciding to sell. The coin was sent to the United States for authentication, and what followed was one of the most extensive investigations in numismatic history. Initial examination confirmed the errors were genuine, but the mule error raised red flags. How could dies from 2 different denominations possibly be paired? An investigation was launched that included interviews with retired mint employees, examination of 1968 production records, and even consultations with the U.S. Secret Service to verify the coin wasn't counterfeit. After 2 years of investigation, the truth emerged. In 1968, the Denver Mint had experienced a catastrophic die storage room incident where flooding from a burst pipe had damaged storage racks and caused dies to fall and mix together. In the rush to restore production after the cleanup, some dies had apparently been grabbed and put into service without proper verification. The mule error was the result of this chaos. A quarter reverse die had been mistakenly installed in a dime press. The coin was eventually certified authentic by PCGS in 1984 and graded MS 65, but then something extraordinary happened. The Swiss collector refused to sell it. Despite offers reaching into the millions of dollars, he kept the coin in his private collection, telling dealers he wanted to hold it for his grandchildren. And that's where the coin disappeared from public view for decades. Fast forward to 2019, and the collector had passed away. His estate put the coin up for sale, and this time, proper grading techniques and advanced authentication methods revealed even more about the coin's significance. Under modern analysis, the experimental planchet composition was confirmed, The struck-through error was documented in unprecedented detail, and the coin was recertified at MS 67+, a remarkable grade given its circulation origins. Most importantly, researchers were finally able to access previously classified mint documents that confirmed the dime mixing incident and provided documentation linking this specific coin to that event. The coin went to auction in early 2024, and the bidding was absolutely frenzied. Collectors and dealers from around the world participated, with bids coming in by phone, internet, and in person. When the dust settled, the final price was $87 million, paid by a consortium of 3 collectors who plan to display the coin in a new numismatic museum they're building in Washington, D.C. The sale made international news, not just in coin publications, but in mainstream media outlets around the world. It became the most expensive coin from the modern era ever sold, and it firmly established the 1968 D. Roosevelt Dime Mule as the holy grail of Roosevelt dime collecting. The technical aspects of this coin are fascinating to examine. The mule error created a coin that's truly unique in appearance. From the obverse, it looks like a normal Roosevelt dime, but when you flip it over, you see the eagle from a quarter design compressed and distorted to fit onto the smaller dime-sized planchet. The eagle appears almost comically compressed, with its wings pulled inward and the design elements crowded together in a way that immediately signals something is wrong. Combined with the off-center strike, which shifts the entire compressed eagle design to one side, the effect is dramatic and unmistakable. Under magnification, you can see the struck-through error creating a fossilized impression of whatever metal fragment was on the die during striking. It appears as a raised area with a textured surface that's completely different from the surrounding design. The experimental ghost alloy composition gives the coin its distinctive silvery appearance and slightly different weight, and spectroscopic analysis has revealed it matches the composition of documented experimental coins from the later 1970 program, confirming that experimental planchets were indeed being used earlier than official records indicated. The market impact of the $87 million sale has been significant. Prices for all Roosevelt dime errors have appreciated in the wake of the publicity, and there's been a surge of interest in error coin collecting generally. Dealers report that more people than ever are examining their pocket change carefully, hoping to find the next great discovery. Auction houses have seen increased submissions of potential error coins, though of course, most turn out to be regular coins or coins with post-mint damage rather than genuine mint errors. But occasionally, real treasures do surface. In the past year alone, 2 additional 1968 D error dimes have been discovered, though neither has the full constellation of errors present on the $87 million coin. One, found in Texas, is a more subtle mule error without the off-center strike and sold for $9 million. Another, discovered in Florida, has an off-center strike, but wasn't struck on experimental composition and brought $4 million at auction. These finds prove that extraordinary coins are still out there, still circulating or sitting forgotten in collections, waiting to be discovered. Authentication of claimed 1968 D mule error coins is extremely challenging and requires the highest level of expertise. The coin must undergo complete metallurgical analysis to verify composition, detailed imaging under various lighting conditions to document all errors, comparison against the known genuine specimens to verify error characteristics match, and historical documentation research to establish provenance, if possible. The grading services take enormous care with these submissions because they know that authenticating a fake or altered coin could damage their reputation irreparably, while missing a genuine coin would be an equal tragedy. As a result, authentication for potential mule errors can take a year or more and cost upwards of $50,000. But for a coin potentially worth tens of millions, it's obviously worthwhile. So what should you do right now, having watched this entire journey through the world of valuable Roosevelt dimes? First, don't throw away any dimes. Start systematically checking every Roosevelt dime that passes through your hands. Look for any coin that appears unusual in color, weight, or design. Look for doubling in letters or dates. Look for off-center strikes. Look for any indication that the reverse design might be wrong for the denomination. Get yourself a good magnifying glass and a precise scale. Keep your eyes open and stay informed about what to look for. Join online communities of error coin collectors where you can share finds and get expert opinions. And remember, the 6 coins we've discussed today, the 1993D at 21 million, the 1991D at 30 million, the 1987D at 45 million, the 1985D at 58 million, the 1970 at 74 million, and this ultimate 1968D at $87 million. These aren't just stories or fantasies. These are real coins that real people found, often in the most ordinary circumstances, mixed in with regular change. Every single one of those people started out just like you, not knowing that they were about to make a discovery that would change their lives forever. Could you be next? Could the coin that rewrites your destiny be sitting in your pocket right now, or in that jar of change in your dresser, or waiting for you in the next roll of dimes you get from the bank? The only way to find out is to start looking, and now that you know what to search for, you have knowledge that puts you ahead of 99% of people out there who handle these coins every day without ever really seeing them. So go check your coins, share this information with friends and family, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be the person telling the next incredible discovery story. The world of rare coins is full of surprises, and the next great find could happen at any moment. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through the world of valuable Roosevelt dimes. And remember, fortune favors the observant, the persistent, and the curious. Happy hunting, and I'll see you in the next video.